Welcome to another episode of High Living with Chad. And today we're going to get straight in to talk about CBD and the significance of this. Now, just to say from the get-go, what I think is important to note, and we can show some trends to immediately give a perspective of where we've been with CBD in the past 5 years. And we'll use two examples. We'll look at America as the first instance, and then look to Australia as well. And we'll be able to see what the trends look like, and you'll be able to see certain spikes that occurred at different periods of time. And if anyone has information around why they think we had these spikes at different times, please add commentary below. We also may add some things over the top of this. But basically what we're able to see is that CBD, particularly firstly looking at America, is trending down. So we've got the data to be able to show that interest in CBD is reducing over time, and reducing at a rate which is more rapid and more accelerated than the reductions that we're seeing in Australia. So right here, now we're going to start seeing interest in terms of trends of CBD in Australia, and we may do a comparison between the US and Australia, which indicates both are on the way down. Australia isn't at the pace of what America is, or the lack of interest of Americans in CBD compared to Australia with search results from Google. But it gives us an indication that something which can be so powerful and can be such an important part of healthcare plus preventative medicine is trending in the wrong direction. And there may be some hypotheses around that, which we can get into today. But to get into it, I think what we've got to see is that if we're on if it looks like it's kind of reducing in some ways, that means for me, let's explore it in some detail, and let's bring this back into conversation, because I think, as I said, in terms of the place of CBD in healthcare and part of general well-being, while this is not medical advice and we need to make this disclaimer, the data suggests that CBD can be tolerated at relatively high doses, which we're going to go into, which has been evidenced in preclinical studies, i.e., which means has been completed in animals testing, so either with mice or rats, as we will go into, and then some of the studies that demonstrate the tolerability of CBD for different populations. Now, with that said, again, if you're listening to this and you have a curiosity of accessing CBD, best point of contact is to speak to some of your doctors. The other reason this is very pivotal at the moment is because one of the Australian companies released data, preliminary findings this week, that indicates, or their belief is that they're going to be able to commercialize on the basis of these results, still obviously pending conversations with the TGA. So it'll be interesting to be able to see whether they're going to be able to get this over the line with the data that they have at present. Obviously, there's two cases that have come before them, or two examples that have come before them, where they weren't able to supply the sufficient information to demonstrate that CBD was effective. This company are making these claims at the moment. They have hit the threshold, and there are still some information that we need to ascertain around that. But that kind of got me thinking around the importance of CBD. And it also, I think, is essential to look at, because typically when people start utilizing cannabis, so if you are cannabis naive, or you're starting on your journey, I think what occurs is that because CBD, firstly, is generally taken at such a low dose that it doesn't have the desired effect of individuals. Plus, I do think there is a lot of negative press, but discourse around CBD. And it's kind of seen as, oh, it's just CBD to start with. It's not where we need to get to, right? It's not the high that I want to get. It's not what I get out of THC, because when I take THC, and if you're consuming it via inhalation, you're going to get an immediate effect. And if you're taking it in, say, edibles or oils or different forms of like different routes of administration, it's going to take a little bit longer. But eventually with the THC, you do get an effect, right? Whereas CBD doesn't always, well, it's not going to at a low dose. But if you take it at the right dose, now there's practicalities to be aware of, i.e., how expensive does that get, right? If you're taking it at a high dose. And the other one is how you're going to be able to consume it. I saw someone this week being able to He was consuming cannabis, CBD flower. Again, I don't do that because of my own lungs, but if I could be here right now with the CBD flower, that would probably be a problem, because I'd be like Puff the Magic Dragon, just enjoying that. But obviously there's things that I take care of because of my past history. But if you have a look at people taking tobacco, or everyone vaping at the moment, regardless if they're vaping tobacco or they're vaping THC, seriously, replace that with some beautiful CBD flower and just see how that vibes with you. I can't believe that we're in a situation where this doesn't have much more widespread adoption. My bet is that we're going to be able to see much more frequent use of CBD flower, and you'll be able to have that at decent doses, because if you're replacing 20 cigarettes a day and you're having some CBD flower, there's price that you need to factor in, of course, but my bet would be that would be a much better option for you. So CBD, as I said, typically pathways are that people that are new to cannabis for the first time are prescribed CBD to start with. If you've got the right doctors, that's generally how they start. See if CBD can be effective, and then if required, move you on to THC. And that isn't always done. And the patient generally doesn't want to start with CBD. As noted before, they're like, oh, I want to feel like I'm utilizing cannabis, but they're like, it's only CBD and I want to get that effect. Where I think maybe some education around what sort of dosing is required and how tolerable we can be for CBD can potentially change that discussion. But then again, the practicalities of taking CBD at high doses, as we're going to get into in some of these studies, you then need to think, is it of my interest to be able to take CBD at these doses compared to then balancing that out and getting lower doses of THC combined with CBD to maybe offset price, and then potential other factors that can be part of your decision-making in terms of taking CBD. And as noted, I've just pulled together some information, and it's a big interest of mine. I think it's undervalued. I honestly believe it's undervalued, and not enough people, medical professionals, people in the industry, patients, are aware of the significance of what CBD can do for your health and your well-being, and how vital it can be as a replacement with a lower safety profile compared to THC. And now some of you are going to be like, oh, THC. So I get it. I'm a big believer, and I'm a big advocate as well. Don't hate me, but I'm just saying that there can be factors associated with THC that if you can offset them if you take CBD. And we can get into that in another time. And if we need to debate, I would love to debate this issue. Personally, a big believer, and I think it's a dosing issue. So what we need to look at first and foremost is some safety factors, for CBD. And there's three among other areas. And again, your doctor or healthcare provider would be able to go into details with you on this. But if you're taking blood thinners, if you're taking benzos, or you're taking SSRIs, ensure that you speak to your doctor before you start looking at significant doses of CBD. That is essential, and that is the recommendation. Speak to your doctor before you start exploring this. The other way to really be a big advocate for this and be part of it is if there's clinical trials at the moment that are exploring the safety or efficacy of CBD for certain areas, sign up and be part of the research. That's probably some of the best ways. Now, if we're going to have a look at some of the data that supports CBD, while there's loads of anecdotal information, and I'll actually be sharing something with you next week, which is very exciting. This week, we're just going to start with some of the data that's available. We've collected this information through a literature review, and I think the best way to start is to look at what we've seen in a preclinical context. That means prior to human consumption by humans. And so we're really going to look at two studies that looked at mice and rats that were taking CBD, and we were able to see, and I'm not going to go into exact doses here because I don't want people to go, oh, I saw this and now I'm going to take wild doses. That's not the point. The point is to provide some information and start some discourse around that. And if you want to look into further information and then engage your doctor around a conversation about what's most appropriate for your health and for the affordability of this, because obviously CBD can be quite expensive. That is a decision for you to make, and that's all it's about. If you're going to live higher, you need to have the right information. If we can support you to do that, so be it. So check out the studies involving CBD for rice and mats, and you're going to be able to see the tolerability of CBD with no toxicity in both of those studies. One was completed in 2017 and the other one was completed in 2020. And again, tolerability means how much were these rats and mice able to tolerate without there being any toxicity, right? First and foremost. Now let's move into a human context. There's been some preliminary data, and I need to give a shout out here, and I'm not sure if I can do that on this pod, but yeah, someone has, I don't want to disclose any names or name drop it all, but yeah, some interesting data came out of Sydney University, and there's preliminary data. I need to check whether it's now been published around PTSD, and we're able to see that individuals were taking 800 milligrams of CBD, and it was suggested that among other benefits, it reduced the nightmares and flashbacks that participants were able to see. Some of the other areas that are interesting before we kind of look at like general health and wellness, because that's where CBD is really positioned. There's been some interesting studies that have been completed in terms of schizophrenia. And again, the biggest point that comes with that was the tolerability of how much these individuals were able to have, which again, we'll probably display some information here so that you can look at it. Another study that we'll reference, again, tolerability over what is kind of generally recommended in Australia. The guidelines are that we shouldn't, the individuals for over-the-counter are looking at 150 milligrams max. Some of these studies are all showing that, you need to be going beyond those levels to kind of hit the max or the most optimal dose to be able to start receiving benefits. And so that was, some of those studies are for anxiety and stress. And so that could probably be could probably touch many more of you, like, who doesn't have anxiety, who doesn't have stress. There are other factors as well that can come into which is useful around reducing cravings. So if you're looking at changing behavior at the moment, if you're looking at potentially, hey, my THC is creeping increasingly in the day, it's kind of coming in at a time where I'm trying to do my work, or I'm wanting to do my work, or I'm wanting to have family time, and it's kind of creeping in, more into that space. I'm not saying at all that is a bad thing, but if you've got self-aware that, hey, maybe I don't want to do that, but then some of the cravings and some of the patterning around your behavior means that you go to your THC maybe earlier than you want, a really good replacement potentially could be integrating CBD at a higher dose to then be able to offset some of those cravings, give you a little bit of relief, and give you that story and that new belief that you have in yourself that maybe you don't need to be able to always go for the THC. And it doesn't need to be THC. There's been some studies demonstrated around cocaine. Again, Australians love that, don't they? So if you're looking at, oh my gosh, I haven't gone a weekend in 7 years without taking any coke, potentially there's areas here that are going to help in those cravings, and then some of your patterning and some of your behavior as well. We know that replacing problematic behaviors with other behaviors is one of the best ways to be able to get behavior change. And so if you have something like CBD, which is relatively safe, and we've got that now from the UN, I think we'll drop that below, we're showing that toxicity levels for some, again, being mindful of those factors that we mentioned before around if you're taking blood thinners, if you're taking benzos or you're taking SSRIs, you fall into a different group. But you're going to be snorting cocaine or you're going to be taking a decent dose of CBD. What is the risk and what is the benefits that you will then, that you'll be able to make a decision on? The other area that I think is so applicable is general health and well-being. So there's so many people are taking CBD at a decent dose to help with sleep, which is a huge factor. We've seen this in terms of some of the data around recovery for athletes, which is super interesting. And then also the reduction of inflammation. So this can go on and on and on. And I think it's helpful to kind of come on today and give a reminder around the importance of CBD within your life. It's not always about THC. There's a very good place for CBD within your dosing. Again, speak to your doctor about what your max level is going to be. There's affordability, again, which needs to be taken into place. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but on that, you had such a high dose of CBD. What does that cost? Well, how much is an expensive restaurant? How much is an expensive night on the town? Like, how much are handbags? Not my vibe, but do you see what I mean? Like, it's what the value you place on it. If you're going to be able to take this high dose of CBD and it's going to give you wonderful effects, it's going to give you high relaxation, it's going to be a bit of a reset, but that reset is in a more healthy way than getting slaughtered on the booze or going to have a night on the coke, whatever your vice is, or spending a lot of money on any other thing, right? But then have a look at what is the benefits and what is the risk of taking something which can be relatively safe, again, checking in with your doctor at high levels and taking that one hit with potentially offsets any high risks that you could have of taking THC at a high level to be able to get that reset, and then potentially getting some intrusive thoughts and paranoia that can come with that. And we know that is the case, particularly for things like edibles and oils. When titration goes, it takes much longer. I'm taking something, it's not working. I'm taking something else. Hour and a half later, you're talking to God, ideally, and you're not talking to the other counterpart. So without getting too deep, you can see here, this is a reminder. Let's get these trends in a different way. CBD can be a very important part of your healthcare. We recommend you diving into some of this as well, starting some conversations below, starting conversations with your loved ones, starting conversations with your community, and getting an understanding around what is the place of CBD in society moving forward. If you want to get some data around that and learn, hey, I don't know, what does actually CBD do for me? I am curious, but I've only had it at small doses. What am I going to do at a high dose? There's a little thing called On Tracker, which is going to help that journey of yours, and it's going to help you understand what does it do to you in the short term, and then what does it do to you over the longer term. This is coming out very soon as a sneak, as mentioned on the pod a few weeks back. So it's going to get better to help you understand what is the right dosing for you, and what is that sort of nice reset, and what is that level for you, being mindful that this may be a much better option than how you currently reset without dealing with the guilt and everything else that can go along with other decision making. This is Chad signing off for Higher Living this week, where we drilled into CBD, and be very interested to see your thoughts. Thank you very much.